What secrets lie behind the stone walls of medieval castles? What burdens did those who ruled from these towers truly carry? And why might the life of a medieval lord have been far more exhausting, dangerous, and isolating than the romantic tales would have us believe? Welcome back to Boring History for Sleep, where we explore the forgotten details of the past that textbooks often overlook. I'm your host, and tonight we're embarking on a journey into the daily reality of medieval lordship, peeling back the layers of myth and legend to reveal what it truly meant to hold power in the Middle Ages. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're checking in from tonight, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Are you settling in for the evening? Or perhaps it's already deep into the night where you are. Please take a moment to like this video, but only if you genuinely enjoy these detailed historical explorations we share together. Your support means everything to this growing community of history enthusiasts. I'd also encourage you to subscribe if you find comfort in these long-form historical narratives. And please, leave a comment below about what historical topic you'd like us to explore next, or simply check in and let us know you're here. You are truly an important part of our community, and I want to thank you for your continued support and for choosing to spend your time with us tonight. Now, to set the perfect atmosphere for our medieval journey, you might want to turn the lights down low, perhaps put on a fan for some gentle background noise, and get comfortable. We have a long, detailed exploration ahead of us, and I want you to feel transported to another time and place. Tonight's journey will take us through 4 distinct aspects of medieval lordship. We'll begin by examining the harsh daily realities, then explore the dramatic life of a specific medieval lord, whose story embodies the complexities of feudal power. Following that, we'll investigate the mysterious world of medieval castle construction. Finally, we'll contrast the lord's experience with that of the peasants who served them, revealing the vast gulf that separated the social classes of medieval society. So settle in, close your eyes, if you wish, and let's step together into the world of medieval lordship, where power came with a price few today could imagine paying. Segment 1. The daily burden of medieval lordship. Picture yourself awakening before dawn in a cold stone chamber. Your breath. The year is 1347, and you are a medieval lord. Outside your shuttered window, you can hear the distant sounds of your domain stirring to life. The lowing of cattle, the creak of cartwheels on cobblestones, the calls of your servants beginning their daily tasks. But as you lie there in your bed, covered by the finest wool and fur your wealth can provide, you're thinking about survival. Your first thought isn't of breakfast or comfort. It's of the dozens of decisions that await you, each one potentially meaning the difference between prosperity and ruin, between life and death for hundreds of people under your protection. This is the weight that settles on your shoulders every morning. As you rise from your bed, your body already aches from yesterday's long hours in the saddle. At 35, you're considered middle-aged in this era, and your joints protest the constant physical demands of your position. There's no such thing as a sedentary lord in medieval times. Your authority must be constantly demonstrated, your presence felt across your lands, your sword. Your first attendant enters the chamber carrying a basin of water that was heated over the kitchen fires. The luxury of hot water isn't about comfort, it's about necessity. In an age where personal hygiene is directly connected to health and social standing, you cannot afford to appear unkempt before your vassals and peasants. Every aspect of your appearance communicates your right to rule, your capability to lead. As you wash, you contemplate the letters that arrived yesterday from neighboring lords. Each one a careful dance of diplomacy and veiled threats. Lord Geoffrey to the north has been moving his men closer to your border. Lady Margaret from the Eastern Holdings has requested a meeting about marriage negotiations for her daughter, but you know that beneath the pleasantries lies a complex web of political maneuvering that could strengthen. The process of dressing takes nearly an hour, not because of vanity, but because each garment serves a purpose. Your undergarments are made of the finest linen. Change daily to prevent the skin diseases that could weaken you in crucial moments. Your tunic, emblazoned with your family's coat of arms, announces your identity to anyone who sees you. Your belt, adorned with precious metals and gems, demonstrates your wealth. Your boots, crafted by the finest leather workers, must be sturdy enough for long rides and elegant enough for formal occasions. But it's the weight of your sword that truly defines your morning routine. As you strap it to your side, you feel the familiar heft of steel and iron, the tool that ultimately enforces your will. This weapon has taken lives, defended your honor, and secured your position. It's not a ceremonial ornament, it's a working instrument of power that you must be prepared to use at any moment. Your breakfast is a formal affair. Even your morning food consumption is a political act, observed by servants, advisors. The bread must be the finest white wheat, a symbol of your ability to afford luxury in an age where most people eat coarse brown bread. The meat, perhaps venison from your own forests or beef from your own herds. The wine, imported from distant regions, shows your foraging influence and wealth. But as you eat, you're not savoring flavors. You're listening to the steady stream of reports from your steward, your marshal. 3 of your serfs have died in the night. 2 from fever. Your miller reports that the grain stores are running lower than expected for this time of year. Your stable master informs you that 2 of your war horses have developed lameness and may not be fit for the upcoming tournament. Each piece of information demands a decision. Will you allow the families of the dead serfs to remain on their holdings? Or will you reassign the land to more productive tenants? Should you purchase grain from neighboring estates at inflated prices? Can you afford to replace the lame horses with new stock? These aren't abstract policy decisions. They're life and death choices that will directly impact hundreds of people. And you must make them quickly, decisively. The weight of such constant decision-making would crush most modern leaders. But for a medieval lord, it's simply the price of power. After breakfast, you begin your morning rounds, a ritual that will consume the next several hours. Your first stop is the castle's great hall. These are your people, your responsibility, and they come to you with their problems because you are the ultimate authority in their lives. The first petitioner is a widow whose husband died in your service. She seeks permission to remarry, but also requests that a new husband be granted the same holdings that supported her family. You must weigh her genuine need against the precedent such a decision might set. If you're too generous, every widow in your domain might expect similar treatment. If you're too harsh, you risk appearing callous and potentially losing the loyalty of your fighting men. Next comes a dispute between two of your tenant farmers over water rights. The stream that waters both their fields has shifted course. After recent storms, your decision will determine which family prospers and which struggles. More importantly, it will establish your reputation for fairness or favoritism. Qualities that will be discussed in every cottage and tavern in your domain. A merchant from a distant city seeks permission to establish a market in your largest town. The potential revenue is tempting, but you must consider how this might affect the established merchants who already pay your fees. You must also evaluate whether this merchant has the resources and connections to make the venture successful, or if granting permission would simply create chaos in your carefully managed economy. Each judgment you render becomes part of your legacy, a building block in the complex structure of reputation that determines your long-term success or failure. Your people watch your decisions carefully, but for what they reveal about your character, your priorities, and your understanding of justice. By midday, you've been working for 6 hours, and your real responsibilities are just beginning. Your marshal reports that scouts have spotted armed men in the forests along your southern border. They might be bandits, they might be advanced scouts for an enemy force, or they might be travelers seeking refuge. But you cannot ignore the possibility that they represent a threat to your people and your holdings. You must decide whether to send a patrol to investigate, potentially provoking a conflict. Either choice carries risks. A patrol might be ambushed, or might accidentally attack innocent travelers. But failing to act could leave your people vulnerable to raiders or invasion. The afternoon brings a different set of challenges. Your accounts manager presents you with the monthly financial reports, and the numbers are troubling. The recent harvest was good, but not exceptional. Your tax collections are steady, but several of your largest tenants are behind on their payments. The cost of maintaining your military forces continues to rise, and you're committed to hosting an expensive feast for visiting dignitaries next month. You must decide whether to increase taxes, potentially sparking resentment among your people, potentially weakening your ability to defend your holdings. Perhaps you could delay some planned improvements to your castle's fortifications, or maybe you could sell some of your horses or luxury goods. Each option carries long-term consequences that extend far beyond the immediate financial impact. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, you finally have time to attend to your personal correspondence. Letters from your overlord require careful responses that demonstrate both loyalty and independence. Messages from your peers must be answered with a precise degree, your relationships without suggesting weakness or desperation. Your evening meal is another formal occasion, shared with your household knights, your senior advisors. The conversation is carefully managed, touching on topics that allow you to gauge the mood of your subordinates, while avoiding subjects that might reveal your own concerns or uncertainties. But even as you sit at your own table, eating food from your own lands, you're aware that your position is fundamentally precarious. Your authority depends on the continued loyalty of your knights, the productivity of your peasants, the strength of your military forces, and the favor of your superiors. Any of these elements could shift without warning. Your day ends much as it began. with you alone in your chamber. But sleep doesn't come bizarrely to a medieval lord. You listen to the night sounds of your castle, the footsteps of guards making their rounds, the distant calls of sentries on the walls. These sounds are both reassuring and troubling, evidence of your security. In the darkness, you plan and worry. You think about the letters you must write, the decisions you must make, the people you must meet. You consider the seasonal challenges approaching, the political maneuvering required to navigate relationships with your peers, the military preparations necessary to defend your holdings. This is the reality of medieval lordship, a life of constant responsibility, perpetual decision-making. Perpetual decision-making. The romantic image of the carefree nobleman, lounging in luxury while others work, is a fantasy that bears no resemblance to the actual experience of holding power in the Middle Ages. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new decisions, and new burdens, and you will face them all, because that is what it means to be a medieval lord. The rise and fall of William Marshal, the greatest knight who ever lived, as we settle deeper into our exploration of medieval lordship. Let us turn our attention to one man whose life perfectly embodies both the possibilities and the perils of holding power in the Middle Ages, and he would become known as the greatest knight who ever lived. A man whose story reads like the finest medieval romance, yet whose struggles and triumphs reveal the harsh realities that lay beneath the glittering surface of courtly life. William Marshal was born around 1146 into a world where his very survival was uncertain. His father, John Marshal, was a minor nobleman who had chosen the wrong side in a civil war that tore England apart during the reign of King Stephen. When William was just 5 years old, his father found himself besieged in his castle in a desperate gambit to buy time. John Marshal agreed to surrender his castle as a guarantee of his word. He offered his youngest son, little William. The story goes that when John Marshal broke his word and used the time to reinforce his castle rather than surrender it, King Stephen was so enraged that he threatened to catapult the boy over the castle walls. According to the chronicles, John Marshal's cold response was that he cared little for the child. Whether this exchange actually occurred or was embellished by later storytellers, it reveals the brutal calculus that governed medieval political life, where even the bonds between father and son could be subordinated to the demands of power. Young William survived this ordeal. But his childhood had taught him that, in the medieval world, trust was a luxury few could afford, and survival depended on one's ability to navigate treacherous waters with skill and cunning. These early lessons would serve him well in the decades to come, as he rose from the ranks of landless younger sons to become one of the most powerful men in England. As a second son, William had no inheritance to look forward to. In medieval society, primogeniture meant that the eldest son inherited everything, leaving younger sons to make their own way in the world. For William, this meant a life dedicated to the profession of arms, seeking his fortune through service to greater lords and hoping to win land and position. His first opportunity came when he was sent to serve in the household of William de Tonquédec, a powerful Norman lord who maintained one of the finest knightly households in France. Here, William learned the arts of war, the complexities of court politics, and the subtle skills necessary to advance in aristocratic society. But his education was not gentle. Medieval military training was brutal and demanding, designed to forge young men into living weapons capable of surviving the chaos of medieval warfare. William's first taste of real combat came during a minor skirmish in Normandy, where he was nearly killed when his helmet was battered so severely that it had to be cut from his head by a blacksmith. This experience, which would have ended the career of a lesser man, only strengthened William's resolve to master the deadly arts of knighthood. He spent the following years honing his skills, learning to read the flow of battle and to strike with devastating effectiveness. His breakthrough came when he was appointed to serve as tutor in arms to Henry the young king. This position brought William into the heart of the Plantagenet court, where he witnessed firsthand the sophisticated political maneuvering that characterized royal governance. But it also exposed him to the darker aspects of medieval court life, including the bitter rivalries that would eventually tear the royal family apart. Henry the young king was everything a medieval prince should be: handsome, charming, but he was also restless, ambitious, and deeply resentful of his father's refusal to grant him real power. William Marshal found himself caught between loyalty to his young master and awareness of the dangerous path the prince was following. When Henry the young king finally rebelled against his father in 1173, William had no choice but to follow him into open warfare against the King of England. The rebellion was a disaster. Henry II was an experienced and cunning ruler who had spent decades consolidating his power across the Angevin Empire. His rebellious sons, despite their youth and enthusiasm, the young king's forces were scattered, his allies abandoned him, and William Marshal found himself on the losing side of a civil war that could have cost him everything. But William's reputation as a warrior had grown during the conflict, and even his enemies recognized his skill and honor. When the rebellion collapsed, Henry II chose to forgive William Marshal, perhaps recognizing that such a gifted knight would be more valuable as an ally. This decision would prove to be one of the most astute political moves of Henry's reign, as William Marshal would go on to serve for successive kings with unwavering loyalty. The years following the failed rebellion were perhaps the most remarkable of William's career. He became the dominant figure in the tournament circuit that flourished across northern France, winning prize after prize and accumulating the wealth that would eventually allow him. But these tournaments were not the romantic spectacles of later legend. They were brutal, dangerous affairs, where knights fought with real weapons. Many participants died or were permanently crippled, and the survivors often bore the scars of their encounters for the rest of their lives. William's success in these tournaments was built on a combination of skill. He studied his opponents carefully, learning their weaknesses and preferred tactics. He formed partnerships with other knights that allowed him to capture more prisoners and claim larger shares of prize money. Most importantly, he understood that tournaments were not just athletic competitions, but political. Reputations were made and alliances forged. Through his tournament success, William accumulated not just wealth, but a network of relationships that spanned the aristocracy of Western Europe. He became known as a man who could be trusted, who honored his commitments, and who possessed the rare ability to remain loyal, even when loyalty came at great personal cost. These qualities would prove invaluable as he navigated the treacherous waters of Plantagenet court politics When Henry the young king died of dysentery in 1183, William Marshal faced a crisis that could have ended his career. He had been deeply loyal to the young king, and there were those who suspected that his loyalty extended to the prince's rebellious ambitions. But William's response to his master's death revealed the depth of his character. He took the cross and departed for the Holy Land, fulfilling a vow that the young king had made on his deathbed. This act of loyalty to a dead master's wishes impressed even his enemies and established William. His crusading adventure nearly ended in disaster when he was captured by Saracen forces. But he managed to secure his release and return to Western Europe with his reputation enhanced rather than diminished. Kings and princes now competed for his services, recognizing that William Marshal represented something rare in medieval politics. A man whose word could be trusted absolutely. Richard the Lionheart, who had inherited the throne after his father's death, appointed William Marshal to serve as a royal marshal, a position that gave him significant authority. But Richard's long absences on crusade and his eventual death in 1199, William's loyalty and political skills to their limits. The question of who should succeed. Richard split the Angevin Empire. Some supported Arthur of Brittany, the son of Richard's deceased brother Geoffrey. Others backed John Lachlan, Richard's surviving brother. William Marshal faced an agonizing choice. Arthur had the better claim by the principles of primogeniture, but John was an adult with established supporters and immediate access to the royal treasury. William's decision to support John would have profound consequences for his own future. John's reign was marked by military disasters, political miscalculations, and growing opposition from his own nobles. The loss of Normandy to Philip Augustus of France in 1204 was a catastrophic blow. English prestige into the personal fortunes of many English nobles, including William Marshal. But perhaps even more damaging was John's increasingly erratic behavior. His tendency to make decisions based on paranoid suspicions rather than sound political judgment. The crisis came to a head in 1215, when John's exactions and arbitrary rule finally provoked his barons to open rebellion. The rebels forced John to agree to Magna Carta, a document that placed significant limits on royal power and established principles that would echo through subsequent centuries of English constitutional development. William Marshal, now in his 70s, found himself in the impossible position of trying to mediate between a king he had served faithfully for decades and barons. When John died suddenly in 1216, leaving behind a 9-year-old son, William Marshal faced the greatest challenge of his long career. The kingdom was in chaos, with French forces occupying much of southern England and many English nobles. The new king, Henry III, was a child who could provide no leadership in the crisis. In this moment of national emergency, the remaining loyal nobles turned to William Marshal. William's acceptance of the regency was perhaps the most selfless act of his career. He was old, tired, and wealthy enough to retire to his estates and live out his remaining years in comfort. Instead, he chose to shoulder the enormous burden of governing a kingdom, knowing that failure would mean not just personal ruin, but the potential destruction of the Plantagenet dynasty. The next 3 years tested every skill William had developed during his long career. He had to rebuild the royal army, negotiate with rebellious barons, coordinate military campaigns against French invaders, and managed the complex web of relationships that held the kingdom together. His greatest achievement was the Battle of Lincoln, where at the age of 70, he personally led a cavalry charge that broke the back of the rebel French alliance. But even in victory, William Marshal understood that his time was limited. His health was failing, and the kingdom needed stable, long-term leadership, but he could not provide. He spent his final years carefully transitioning power to younger men, ensuring that the institutions of government would survive his passing. When he died in 1219, he was mourned not just as a great warrior. William Marshal's story reveals the extraordinary possibilities that medieval society, courage, and integrity to seize them. But it also illustrates the constant dangers that surrounded even the most successful medieval lords. His life was marked by near-death experiences, political crises, and moments when a single wrong decision could have meant exile. He survived and thrived because he understood that in the medieval world, the legacy of William Marshal extends far beyond his own lifetime. His biography, written by a herald who knew him personally, provides us with one of the most detailed portraits of medieval lordship that survives from the period. Through his story, we can see how the highest levels of medieval society actually functioned, how great lords navigated the complex web of loyalties and obligations, and how individual character and capability could triumph over the limitations of birth. As we reflect on William Marshal's extraordinary life, we begin to understand that medieval lordship was not about luxury or ease, but about the constant struggle to balance competing demands, to maintain loyalty in the face of overwhelming pressure, and to serve ideals that transcended personal interest. His story reminds us that the greatest medieval lords, but those who understood that true nobility lay in the service of something greater than themselves. The hidden world of castle construction and medieval architectural mysteries. As we continue our journey through the world of medieval lordship, we turn now to one of the most fascinating and mysterious aspects of their lives, the great stone fortresses. These castles, which still dot the landscape of Europe today, hold secrets that archaeologists and historians are only beginning to uncover. The construction of these massive structures reveals not only the engineering genius of medieval builders, but also the complex social. The mystery begins with a simple question: manage to construct buildings that have survived for nearly 1,000 years. The answer lies in a sophisticated understanding of engineering, a materials science that challenges our assumptions about medieval intellectual capabilities. Consider the case of Chateau Galliard, built by Richard the Lionheart in Normandy at the end of the 12th century. This fortress, constructed in just 2 years, represented a revolution in military architecture. Archaeological investigations have revealed that its builders employed mathematical principles that wouldn't be formally described by European scholars. The castle's walls follow precise geometric patterns designed to deflect projectiles. Its foundation stones were cut and fitted with tolerances that would be impressive. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Chateau Galliard is what archaeologists call the builder's mystery, hidden within the castle's walls. Recent excavations have uncovered a series of chambers and passages that appear to serve no obvious defensive purpose. These spaces, accessible only through concealed entrances, contain symbols and markings that suggest they may have been used for purposes Some scholars believe they were treasure vaults, others suggest they were escape routes, and still others propose they may have been sites for secret rituals or meetings. The construction of a major castle was an undertaking that could consume the resources of an entire region for years or even decades. The process began long before the first stone was laid, with a careful selection of a site. The ideal location needed to control important transportation routes, have access to fresh water, and sit on bedrock stable enough to support massive stone walls. Once a site was chosen, the real work began. Medieval lords had to assemble teams of specialists whose skills were jealously guarded secrets passed down through generations. The master mason was perhaps the most crucial figure, responsible for the overall design and engineering of the structure. These men possessed knowledge that bordered on the miraculous, understanding how to create walls that could withstand both the battering of siege engines and the slow erosion of centuries. The quarrying and transportation of stone presented challenges that modern engineers still find impressive. Medieval builders somehow managed to move blocks, weighing several tons across distances of many miles, often over terrain that would challenge modern, heavy equipment. Recent archaeological work has uncovered evidence of sophisticated logistics systems, including temporary roads, and even early forms of cranes and pulleys. But the stone itself tells only part of the story. Hidden within the walls of medieval castles, archaeologists have discovered evidence of a complex mortar chemistry that allowed these structures to actually grow stronger over time. The secret lay in the use of specific types of lime, combined with organic materials that created a chemical reaction lasting for centuries. Some castle walls have been found to contain mortar that is harder today than it was when the castle was first built. The mystery deepens when we consider the symbolic aspects of castle construction. Medieval builders incorporated hidden messages and coded information, creating structures that functioned as both fortifications and elaborate puzzles. The positioning of windows, the arrangement of rooms, and even the patterns of stone cutting often followed symbolic systems that conveyed information. Take, for example, the curious case of Castel del Monte. This octagonal fortress has puzzled scholars for centuries, because it appears to have been designed more as a philosophical statement than as a practical fortification. The castle's 8 towers, its mathematical proportions, and its astronomical alignment suggest that Frederick intended it to represent his understanding of cosmic order. Every room in Castel del Monte has exactly 8 sides, and the entire structure is aligned with celestial events that held special significance in medieval cosmology. But perhaps, most mysteriously, the castle contains hidden chambers that can only be accessed when light enters through specific windows at particular times of day. These chambers contain symbols and inscriptions that scholars are still trying to decipher. The construction process itself was fraught with dangers and mysteries that extended far beyond the obvious risks of working with heavy stone and primitive tools. Medieval building sites were places where different craft traditions met, and sometimes clashed, where local workers interacted with traveling specialists, and where knowledge was exchanged in ways that left lasting marks on the structures themselves. Archaeological evidence suggests that medieval builders often incorporated talismans and protective symbols into their work, hiding them within walls and foundations where they would remain undisturbed. These objects ranged from simple good luck, charms, to elaborate ritual items that suggest the builders believed their work. Recent excavations have uncovered everything from iron horseshoes to complex geometric patterns carved into foundation stones. The organization of a medieval building site resembled a small city with its own social hierarchy. The master craftsmen occupied the highest positions, jealously guarding their technical knowledge and earning wages that placed them among the medieval middle class. Below them were the skilled workers, masons, and metal workers who possessed specialized knowledge but lacked the authority. At the bottom of the hierarchy were the laborers, often recruited from the surrounding countryside, who performed the back-breaking work of moving stone, mixing mortar, and digging foundations. But even these workers played a crucial role in the construction process, bringing local knowledge about materials, weather patterns, and terrain that could mean the difference between success and failure. The financing of castle construction reveals another layer of mystery. Medieval accounting records, where they survive, show that the cost of building a major fortress, lords had to develop sophisticated financial instruments to fund their projects, including early forms of bonds, mortgages, and investment partnerships. Some castles were built using resources pooled from multiple lords, creating complex ownership arrangements. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery surrounding medieval castle construction, many techniques used by medieval builders appear to have been forgotten, only to be rediscovered centuries later, or, in some cases, the precise methods used to create certain types of stone carving, the formulas for specific mortar compositions, and the engineering principles behind some of the most impressive architectural features remain mysteries. Recent archaeological investigations have revealed that medieval builders possessed knowledge of acoustics that allowed them to create spaces with remarkable sound properties. Castle chapels were designed to amplify certain frequencies while suppressing others, creating environments that enhanced the spiritual experience of worship. Great halls were constructed to carry a lord's voice clearly to every corner of the room, ensuring that his words would be heard by all who gathered there. The defensive features of medieval castles also incorporated sophisticated psychological warfare techniques that went far beyond simple intimidation. The design of castle approaches forced attackers to move through carefully choreographed spaces that created feelings of vulnerability and disorientation. The positioning of arrow slits, the angles of walls, and even the coloring of stone were all calculated to demoralize enemies and boost the confidence of defenders. Some of the most fascinating discoveries in recent years have come from the exploration of castle water systems. Medieval engineers created elaborate networks of wells and drainage channels that ensured castles could withstand long sieges while maintaining sanitary conditions. These systems often incorporated hidden features that served both practical and strategic purposes. The mysteries of medieval castle construction extend to the tools and techniques used by their builders. Archaeological evidence suggests that medieval craftsmen possessed instruments and methods that were far more sophisticated than previously believed. Recent discoveries have uncovered precision measuring devices, complex mathematical instruments, and even early forms of surveying equipment that allowed builders. But perhaps the most profound mystery lies in the question of how medieval builders. The sophistication of their technique suggests contact with advanced engineering traditions, possibly including knowledge inherited from Roman builders or acquired through contact with Islamic architects. Some scholars believe that the Crusades served as a conduit for architectural knowledge, allowing European builders to learn techniques developed in the Middle East and North Africa. The symbolic language embedded in castle architecture provides another rich area for investigation. Medieval builders incorporated coded messages into their work, using geometric patterns and symbolic imagery to convey information about their patrons, their beliefs, and their understanding of the world. These messages were often hidden in plain sight, visible to those who knew how to read them, but invisible to casual observers. As we explore these architectural mysteries, we begin to understand that medieval castles were far more than simple fortifications. They were complex cultural artifacts that embodied the beliefs, knowledge, and aspirations of their builders. Each castle tells a story not just of military strategy and political power, but of the sophisticated intellectual and cultural world that existed in medieval Europe. The ongoing archaeological investigation of medieval castles continues to yield new discoveries that challenge our understanding of medieval society. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of advanced metallurgy, sophisticated engineering techniques, and complex social systems that suggest medieval civilization was far more advanced than previously believed. These discoveries remind us that the past holds many secrets, and that the stone walls of medieval castles still have much to teach us. One of the most remarkable recent discoveries concerns the heating systems found within medieval castles. Far from the drafty, cold fortresses of popular imagination, many castles incorporated sophisticated climate control systems that provided warmth throughout the structure. Archaeological investigations have revealed networks of hypercost systems, similar to those used by the Romans, that channeled heated air through hollow walls and floors. These systems were so well designed that they could maintain comfortable temperatures even during the harshest winters. The discovery of these heating systems has led to a broader re-evaluation of medieval comfort. Castle inhabitants enjoyed amenities, including private chambers with adjustable ventilation, sanitary facilities that were far more sophisticated than previously believed, and even early forms of glass windows that could be opened and closed to regulate airflow. Perhaps even more intriguing are the recent discoveries related to medieval castle gardens and ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis have revealed that many castle complexes included elaborate garden designs that served both aesthetic and practical purposes. These gardens were not simple decorative features, but complex ecological systems, medicine, and materials for the castle's inhabitants. The medicinal gardens found within castle walls reveal another layer of medieval sophistication. These carefully planned spaces contained herbs and plants from across the known world, suggesting that medieval lords had access to global trade networks and possessed detailed knowledge of pharmacology. The arrangement of these gardens followed principles that maximized the therapeutic properties of different plants, while creating environments that were both beautiful. Archaeological evidence also suggests that medieval castles served as centers of technological innovation. Excavations have uncovered workshops where skilled craftsmen experimented, textile production, and mechanical engineering. These workshops were not merely places of production. Medieval inventors pushed the boundaries of what was possible with available materials and knowledge. The role of women in castle construction and management has also emerged as a significant area of recent research. Documentary evidence and archaeological findings suggest that noble women played crucial roles in the planning and oversight of castle construction projects. Some of the most innovative architectural features found in medieval castles can be traced to the influence of women who brought knowledge from their family holdings or foreign marriages. The international character of medieval castle building becomes more apparent with each new discovery. Stonemasons' marks found in castle walls reveal that craftsmen traveled vast distances to work on major projects, bringing with them techniques and knowledge from across Europe and beyond. This international collaboration resulted in architectural innovations that represented the best knowledge available from multiple cultural traditions. These ongoing discoveries continue to reshape our understanding of medieval society and remind us that the lords who commissioned these great fortresses were not simply warrior chieftains, but sophisticated patrons. Understood the importance of architecture as both practical necessity, the mysteries embedded in their stone walls, into a civilization that was far more complex and advanced than we once believed. The Great Divide, life beyond the castle walls. As our exploration of medieval lordship draws to a close, we must examine the vast gulf that separated the lives of medieval lords from those of the peasants, formed the foundation of their power. This final segment reveals how the elaborate world of castle life, with all its complexities and burdens, understanding this divide is essential to grasping the true nature of medieval society and the profound responsibilities that came with lordship. To appreciate the magnitude of this social chasm, we must first understand the sheer scale of inequality. A great lord might control lands that supported thousands of peasant families, each of whom produced wealth. The contrast between the stone halls, where lords dined on imported wine and exotic spices, where peasants subsisted on porridge and ale, represents one of the most extreme examples of social stratification in human history. The daily existence of a medieval peasant began before dawn, not with the complex political calculations that occupied a lord's morning, but with the simple struggle to survive another day. While the lord in his castle contemplated diplomatic correspondence, a military strategy, sharing thin gruel and planning, the day's back-breaking labor in fields, the peasant's cottage constructed of mud, straw, and whatever timber could be scavenged, stood in sharp contrast to the soaring stone walls of the lord's castle. These humble dwellings, typically consisting of a single room shared by an entire family, offered little protection from the elements and no privacy whatsoever. The floor was bare earth, the windows were unglazed holes, yet within these constraints, peasant families created lives of remarkable resilience. Archaeological evidence from medieval villagites reveals that peasants developed sophisticated systems of mutual support, sharing tools, labor, and resources in ways that allowed them to survive in conditions that would have quickly destroyed individuals. Acting alone, the communal nature of peasant life, from shared ovens to collective farming practices, the agricultural work that consumed the peasant's day was governed by rhythms, that had remained unchanged for centuries. The cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting determined not just the peasant's daily activities. Unlike the lord, who could delegate many of his responsibilities to subordinates, the peasant family had no choice but to perform every task themselves, from dawn to dusk. The tools available to medieval peasants were simple but effective, representing generations of accumulated knowledge about working the land. The wooden plough, the iron-tipped spade, the sickle for harvesting grain. These implements were crafted by local smiths and passed down through families like precious heirlooms. The loss or breakage of a crucial tool could mean the difference between survival and starvation. The peasants' diet reflected the harsh realities of their economic position. While lords feasted on multiple courses of meat, peasants subsisted primarily on a porridge, made from whatever grains they could grow or afford to purchase. This monotonous diet was occasionally supplemented with eggs from their chickens. But meat was a luxury reserved for special occasions or obtained through poaching. The legal status of peasants varied considerably across different regions and time periods, but most were bound to their lord's land by obligations that severely limited their freedom of movement and economic opportunity. The institution of serfdom meant that peasants could not leave their lord's estate without permission, could not marry without consent, and were required to work a specified number of days each week on the lord's personal lands, in addition to managing their own plots. These labor obligations, known as, created a complex system of mutual dependency between lord and peasant. The peasant provided the labor that made the lord's lifestyle possible, while the lord theoretically provided protection and justice in return. But this relationship was fundamentally unequal, with the lord possessing the military power and legal authority to enforce his will upon his peasants. The lord's responsibility for his peasants' welfare was real in times of famine or disaster. A conscientious lord might open his granaries to feed his starving people, but such generosity was voluntary rather than legally required. More commonly, lords viewed their peasants as economic assets, much like livestock or agricultural equipment. The religious life of medieval peasants provided both comfort and additional burden. The local church, often built and maintained through peasant labor and contributions, served as the center of community life and the source of spiritual guidance. But the church also demanded its own taxes in the form of tithes, and the peasant was expected to contribute labor for church, construction, and maintenance projects. The contrast between the elaborate religious ceremonies conducted in castle chapels and the simple services held in village churches, social divisions of medieval society. While lords employed private chaplains and endowed elaborate religious foundations, peasants gathered in buildings that were often little more than wooden sheds with earthen floors and unglazed windows. Educational opportunities for peasants were virtually non-existent. While lords employed tutors for their children and maintained libraries of manuscripts, peasant children learned only what was necessary for their expected roles in agricultural society. Literacy was rare among the peasant class, and formal education was considered unnecessary and potentially dangerous, as it might give peasants ideas above their station. The justice system that governed peasant life was administered by the lord or his representatives, creating a situation where the same person extracted labor and taxes from the peasants also served as their judge in legal disputes. This system while it provided a form of order and dispute resolution, was inherently biased. Despite these constraints, peasant communities developed their own forms of governance and social organization. Village councils, informal networks of mutual support, and traditional systems of resource allocation allowed peasants to maintain some degree of autonomy within the broader feudal structure. These grassroots institutions often proved more responsive to peasant needs than the formal legal system controlled by their lords. The seasonal rhythms that governed peasant life created periods of intense labor, alternating with times of relative rest. The harvest season demanded the participation of every member of the peasant family, from elderly grandparents to young children, all working together to gather the crops. These periods of communal labor created strong social bonds and shared experiences that helped maintain village cohesion. The relationship between peasants and their natural environment was intimate and sophisticated. Peasant farmers possessed detailed knowledge of soil types and plant biology that allowed them to maximize yields from marginal land. This knowledge, passed down through generations and refined through constant experimentation, represented a form of scientific understanding that was often more practical and effective than the theoretical knowledge possessed by educated elites. The contrast between the lord's mobility and the peasant's rootedness to the land created fundamentally different worldviews. While lords travelled to courts, participated in tournaments, and maintained correspondence with peers across Europe, peasants typically spent their entire lives within a few miles of their birthplace. This geographic limitation created deep connections to specific places, but also meant that peasants had little knowledge of the broader world. The economic relationship between lords and peasants was complex and often contradictory. While lords extracted significant wealth from their peasants through various taxes, rents, and labor obligations, they also had economic incentives to ensure their peasants' basic welfare. A lord whose peasants were too impoverished or malnourished to work effectively would see his own income decline, creating a system where exploitation was tempered by practical necessity. The military obligations of peasants differed dramatically from those of their lords. While lords were expected to serve as heavily armored cavalry, peasants were typically called upon to serve as infantry, armed with simple weapons and wearing little or no armor. This military service was often dangerous and disruptive to agricultural work, but it also provided peasants with opportunities to travel beyond their home villages and potentially earn rewards. The festivals and celebrations that marked the medieval calendar created temporary reversals of the normal social order. During harvest festivals, Christmas celebrations, and other religious observances, lords and peasants might participate in shared activities that temporarily obscured the rigid hierarchies. These occasions provided outlets for social tension and reinforced community bonds across class lines. The health and medical care available to peasants was rudimentary compared to the sophisticated treatments available to lords. While lords could afford trained physicians and exotic medicines, peasants relied on traditional remedies prepared by local healers using herbs and techniques. The higher mortality rates among peasants reflected not just their harsher living conditions, but also their limited access to medical care. The housing conditions of peasants created living situations that would be considered uninhabitable by modern standards. Entire families shared single rooms with their livestock, creating the lack of chimneys in many peasant homes meant that smoke from cooking fires filled the living space, creating respiratory problems that affected entire families. Despite these hardships, peasant communities developed rich cultural traditions that provided meaning and beauty in their difficult lives. Folk songs, traditional dances, storytelling, and seasonal celebrations created a vibrant cultural life that existed parallel to the sophisticated court culture of their lords. These traditions, passed down orally through generations, preserved knowledge. The relationship between lords and peasants was not simply one of exploitation. Many lords felt genuine responsibility for their peasants' welfare and took pride in the prosperity of their estates. Similarly, many peasants felt genuine loyalty to lords who treated them fairly. These personal relationships, built over generations, created bonds. The legacy of this great divide between lords and peasants shaped European society for centuries. The extreme inequality of medieval society created social tensions that would eventually contribute to peasant revolts, political reforms, and the gradual transformation of European society. Understanding this divide helps us appreciate both the achievements of medieval civilization and the human costs of the social system that made those achievements possible. As we conclude our exploration of medieval lordship, we're reminded that the elaborate world of castle life, with all its complexities and sophistication, existed because of the labor and sacrifice of countless peasants who lived in conditions of poverty. The responsibilities of lordship, however burdensome they might have seemed to those who bore them, were purchased through the systematic exploitation of the vast majority of medieval people. This sobering reality adds depth to our understanding of medieval society. And so we reach the end of our journey through the world of medieval lordship, a world that was far more complex, challenging, and morally ambiguous than the romantic tales of chivalry and honor would have us believe. From the daily burdens of decision-making that consumed a lord's every waking hour, to the extraordinary life of William Marshal and his navigation of political treachery and personal loyalty, to the architectural mysteries that still puzzle us today, and finally to the stark contrasts between the lives of lords and the peasants who supported them. The medieval lords we've encountered tonight were not the carefree nobles of popular imagination, but rather men and women who bore the weight of entire societies on their shoulders. They made decisions that affected thousands of lives, managed resources that determined the survival of entire communities, and navigated political systems where a single mistake could mean death or exile. Their castles, far from being mere symbols of oppression, were complex centers of administration. Yet as we've seen, this world of lordship existed only because of the labor and sacrifice of the peasants. The gulf between the stone halls of the castle and the mud floors of peasant cottages reminds us the medieval achievements came at human costs, that we must not forget. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you'll dream of stone corridors and flickering torches, of the weight of mail armor and the responsibility of command, of the mysteries hidden within ancient walls and the secrets that the past still holds. These stories of medieval lordship, with all their complexity and contradiction. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of medieval lordship. Your presence here, your engagement with these stories, and your support for this channel, a place where the past comes alive and history becomes a source of wonder until we meet again in the shadowy corridors of the past. May your dreams be filled with the echoes of ancient stones and the whispers of long-forgotten voices. Sweet dreams, and good night.